He was supposed to be my rival, not the boy who made my chest tighten every time he laughed. Funny how fate works. One broken window in chemistry class, one unfair punishment, and suddenly we were stuck in the same room, cleaning up the mess neither of us really caused. By the time the janitor's closet slammed shut and left us with just the echo of our own breathing, I realized two terrifying things. First, I was going to be here with him a lot longer than expected. And second, I wasn't sure I minded. The high school we went to was like every cliché you'd see in a movie: rows of gray lockers, a football field that smelled like grass and sweat, teachers who thought detention was the cure for all sins. But beneath all that, there was a rhythm, a strange undercurrent that hummed beneath the surface. And somehow, standing next to him, I could feel it beating louder than my own pulse. His name was Aiden Cross, the kind of boy who had everyone fooled. To the teachers, he was trouble with a capital plate assignments, a smart mouth, eyes that dared you to call him out. To the students, he was either the guy you wanted to punch or the one you wanted to kiss, depending on how long you stared. To me, he was a storm I never asked for but couldn't stop myself from walking into. The mop squeaked against the linoleum floor, and my hands shook like I had never held a cleaning tool before. Ridiculous. It wasn't the mope, it was the fact that Aiden was 2 steps away. Sleeves rolled up, muscles flexing with every push of the broom, a faint smirk tugging at his lips like he knew exactly what effect he had on me. "So," he said finally, his voice breaking the silence, low and careless. "Do you always look like you're about to faint when you hold a mop? Or is this a special occasion?" I glared at him, too fast, too defensive. "Shut up." He laughed, short and sharp, echoing off the empty walls. And God help me, it sounded like music. That was the start of a punishment that was supposed to be nothing more than wasted afternoons sweeping, wiping desks, and pretending we weren't both thinking about how unfair it was. But day after day, the silence filled with conversations. The sarcasm softened into jokes. The glares melted into glances that lasted too long. And slowly, dangerously, I started to realize something. Maybe detention wasn't a punishment at all. Maybe it was destiny giving me the one thing I didn't even know I needed. The first week, we barely spoke beyond insults. Aiden had that look in his eyes, like the world had wronged him, and I was just another face in the crowd. But when we both reached for the same bottle of cleaning spray one afternoon, our hands collided. Just a touch, brief, electric. He didn't move right away. Neither did I. Something shifted. "You always this jumpy?" he asked, softer this time. "No," I lied, my voice cracking like the cheap floor tiles under our feet. For a second, he studied me, really studied me, as if peeling away every wall I had carefully built around myself. And then, mercifully, he pulled back. But from that moment, I couldn't stop noticing him. The way his jaw clenched when he was angry. The way his eyes softened when he wasn't pretending to be the tough guy everyone believed he was. The way he looked at me sometimes like he wanted to say something but couldn't. By the second week, we were laughing together. Not the fake kind you give to a teacher when they tell a bad joke, but the kind that makes your stomach hurt and your cheeks flush. I'd never felt that with anyone before. And yet, every laugh came with a knife in my chest. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not to me. Not with him. One rainy afternoon, the janitor forgot about us. The lights flickered. The rain slammed against the windows, and for a moment the whole world seemed to shrink until it was just me and Aiden, 2 boys in a classroom that smelled like chalk and damp air. I tried to focus on scrubbing the desk, but his voice broke through the storm. "You ever feel like you don't belong here?" he asked suddenly. I froze, sponge dripping in my hand. "What do you mean?" "School, this town, everything, like it's all wrong somehow. Like you're waiting for something else to happen, but it never does." His words sank into me like stones. Because yes, God, yes, I'd felt that my whole life but never said it out loud. Every day, I admitted. When I looked up, he was staring at me again. Not mocking, not angry, just raw, vulnerable. And for the first time, I saw the truth behind the smirk. He wasn't just trouble. He was trapped. Just like me. That night, when I went home, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that moment, that look, over and over. And I knew then I was already too far gone. I'll stop here for now because what came after would change everything. Shatter the walls I thought were unbreakable. And leave me with a choice I never imagined I'd have to make. And it all started with one simple truth. Sometimes punishment is just the universe's way of putting you where you're meant to be. The rain kept falling that night, the kind that drowns out your thoughts if you let it. I told myself it was just the weather that kept me restless, that I wasn't lying awake because of the way Aiden had looked at me. But every time thunder rattled the windows, I saw his face again, those eyes that carried both danger and safety all at once. By the time detention rolled around the next day, I was already bracing myself. The strange thing? I wasn't dreading it anymore. When I walked into the classroom, Aiden was already there, slouched back in his chair, tapping a pen against the desk in a lazy rhythm. His hair was damp, messy from the rain outside, and for some reason I couldn't stop staring. "You're late," he said, not even looking up. "2 minutes," I muttered, dropping my bag. He finally glanced at me, that crooked smirk tugging at his lips. "2 minutes is still late. Guess I'll have to add it to your record." "Since when are you keeping records?" "Since you started looking guilty for no reason." The words hit harder than I expected, because he wasn't wrong. Being around him made me feel exposed, like he could see through every excuse, every defense. We worked in silence for a while, sweeping floors, stacking chairs. But it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of strangers anymore. It was charged, like a string pulled tight, waiting to snap. At one point, when I bent down to pick up a stray notebook, his hand brushed against mine again. Just like before, neither of us moved at first. The touch was small, innocent even, but it carried the weight of something neither of us dared name. "You ever gonna stop flinching?" he asked quietly. "I'm not flinching," I whispered back. Could have fooled me. There was no laughter this time, no teasing lilt. Just a low voice, steady and unshakable. I forced myself to look up, and when I did, I almost forgot how to breathe. His eyes weren't mocking anymore, they were searching. Waiting. The moment broke when the door creaked open and the janitor poked his head in, mumbling something about finishing up. Aiden pulled away instantly, running a hand through his hair like nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had shifted again, and there was no going back. By the third week, detention didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like the only time I was truly awake. We started talking more about everything and nothing. Music, movies, teachers we couldn't stand, dreams we were too scared to say out loud. One afternoon, as we wiped down chalkboards, Aiden suddenly asked, "You ever think about leaving this town?" "All the time," I admitted. "Where would you go?" I shrugged, trying to play it off. "Anywhere. Somewhere people don't know me. Somewhere I can start over." He leaned against the board, arms crossed, watching me. "Yeah, same." There was a heaviness in his voice that made me pause. He wasn't just saying it. He meant it. "Why?" I asked softly. He looked away, jaw tightening. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "Because this place doesn't want me." Not really. The words stuck in my chest like glass. I wanted to say something, anything, but the truth was I knew exactly what he meant. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering when he had stopped being the boy I was supposed to hate and started becoming the one person who understood me. It wasn't all easy. Aiden was still Aiden, reckless, sharp-tongued, always one step away from trouble. One day he skipped class and showed up late to detention, his lips split and knuckles bruised. "What happened?" I demanded, dropping the broom. "Relax," he muttered, waving me off. "It's nothing. That's not nothing. Just some guys. Doesn't matter." "It matters to me," I snapped before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I'd said to him before. Aiden froze, then slowly turned toward me. For once, there was no smirk, no walls. Just a flicker of surprise, and something else I couldn't name. "You shouldn't," he said finally, his voice low. "Too late," I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. He stared at me like he wanted to argue, to push me away. But instead, he just sat down, burying his face in his hands. And for the first time, I saw him break. The next days blurred together. Detention became our secret world, the place where we could let down our guards. Aiden started opening up in pieces about his messed up home life, his father who barely noticed him, the fights he picked because it was easier than being invisible. I listened. I let him be raw, unfiltered. And in return, I gave him pieces of myself I'd never shared with anyone. My fears, my loneliness, the parts of me that didn't fit the mold this town wanted. Somewhere in all of that, friendship stopped being enough. It happened one Friday evening. We had finished cleaning earlier than usual, and the sun was sinking, painting the room in shades of orange and gold. The world felt still, like it was holding its breath. Aiden was sitting on the teacher's desk, legs swinging, eyes fixed on the window. I was leaning against the chalkboard, watching him without meaning to. "You know what sucks?" he said suddenly. "What?" "That this," he gestured around the empty room, "ends soon. Detention. Back to pretending we don't exist outside these walls." The thought hit me harder than I expected. We don't have to pretend. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a terrifying, exhilarating moment, the air between us crackled with something undeniable. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was me. All I knew was that 1 second we were staring at each other, and the next his lips brushed against mine, soft, hesitant, like a question waiting for an answer. I froze, heart racing so loud I was sure he could hear it. But then I kissed him back. It wasn't perfect. Our noses bumped. My hands shook. His breath was uneven. But it was real. And in that single, fragile kiss, everything I had been running from crashed over me in waves. When we finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, and he whispered, "We're so screwed." I laughed, breathless. "Yeah, but I don't care." That was the beginning of everything and the start of the storm we didn't see coming. Because if there's one thing high school loves more than football games and gossip, it's tearing apart anything that doesn't fit the mold. And we were about to find out just how far people would go to remind us of that. Secrets are fragile things. Once cracked, they spread like spiderwebs across glass, impossible to contain. For weeks after that kiss, Aiden and I lived in a world that belonged only to us. Detention was no longer punishment, it was sanctuary. Behind the locked door of that empty classroom, we could laugh too loudly, argue too fiercely, touch too briefly. Every stolen glance carried meaning. Every brush of his hand left me reeling for hours. But outside those walls, reality pressed in hard. In the hallways, Aiden was still Aiden, untouchable, sharp-tongued, reckless. He shoved his way past lockers, skipped classes, made teachers roll their eyes. And I stayed invisible. The quiet kid, the one who kept his head down. Sometimes, between classes, our eyes would meet across the crowd. Just for a second. Just enough to remind me we weren't imagining it. Then he'd look away, shoulders tense, slipping back into the role the world expected of him. It hurt, but I understood. We couldn't risk it. Not here. Not yet. Still, secrets have a way of leaking. Started small. A laugh too genuine when he sat behind me in history. A note slipped into my locker with handwriting I recognized instantly. A moment during detention when the janitor walked in unexpectedly and found us standing closer than we should have. Rumors are predators. They don't need evidence, they just need blood in the water. By the time spring rolled around, whispers had begun. I could feel them trailing me down the hallway, sharp and cutting. "Why's Cross hanging out with him so much? Don't you think it's weird?" "Nah, you're reading into it." But the more people noticed, the more careful Aiden became. He stopped talking to me in class, stopped walking beside me in the cafeteria. In detention, he'd lean against the wall, arms crossed, keeping space between us. At first, I told myself it was strategy. He was protecting us. But each night, lying in bed replaying the distance in his eyes, I wondered if maybe I was losing him. One Friday after school, I found him on the bleachers in the gym, sitting alone. The place was nearly empty, the faint squeak of sneakers echoing from the far court. "Hey," I said, climbing down to sit beside him. He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the floor. "You've been distant," I added carefully. He finally turned, and for once there was no smirk, no armor. Just exhaustion. "They're talking, you know?" "I know. They'll eat you alive." The words cut deeper than I expected. "And you?" His jaw clenched. "I can handle it. And I can't." "That's not what He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that hurt was already here, gnawing at me every time he pulled away. Instead, I said softly, "You don't get to decide that." He looked at me then, really looked. And for a moment I saw the war inside him, the part that wanted to keep me safe, and the part that wanted me too much to let go. Finally, he whispered, "We're screwed, aren't we?" I almost laughed, but my chest ached too much. Yeah, but maybe that's the point. The following week, everything collapsed. It was a Tuesday morning when I opened my locker and found it plastered with notes. Some crude, some cruel. All of them screaming the truth we had tried so hard to bury. Fag. Lover boy. Cross's pet. I froze, throat tightening, the hallway buzzing around me like a swarm. Someone laughed behind me. Someone else whispered too loudly. Before I could move, Aiden appeared. He took one look at the locker, then at me, and I saw the storm ignite in his eyes. "Who did this?" he demanded, voice like gravel. "Aiden, don't." I tried, but he was already moving, shoving through the crowd, fists clenched. The fight was quick and brutal. By the time teachers pulled him off, his knuckles were bloody, and the other boy was groaning on the floor. Aiden didn't care. His chest heaved, eyes wild, like he would have burned the whole school down if they let him. They suspended him for a week. I didn't see him again until the night he showed up outside my window, rain dripping off his hoodie, eyes filled with something halfway between rage and desperation. "Come with me," he said simply. I didn't ask where. I just climbed out the window. We ended up at the old park on the edge of town, the one nobody really went to anymore. The swings creaked in the wind, the slides rusted with age. We sat on the damp grass, rain soaking our clothes, neither of us speaking at first. Finally, Aiden broke the silence. "I can't do this anymore." The words nearly gutted me. "Do what?" "Pretend like it doesn't matter. Pretend like I don't." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Like I don't care about you." My heart stumbled. "Then stop pretending." He turned toward me, rain dripping down his face, eyes burning in the dim light. "You don't get it. If I let them see, if I let this be real, they'll destroy you." "Maybe," I admitted. My voice shook, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "But I'd rather get destroyed with you than keep living like you don't mean anything." For a moment he just stared, breath ragged. Then he grabbed my face, pulled me in, and kissed me like he was drowning. The rain fell harder. The world disappeared. And in that raw, desperate kiss, I knew. No matter how bad it got, no matter how much the world tried to break us, I wasn't letting him go. But love doesn't shield you from consequences. If anything, it draws them closer. By the next morning, everyone knew. The fight, the notes, the kiss in the rain someone swore they saw. We weren't a rumor anymore. We were a target. And the storm that followed would test us in ways neither of us were ready for. Whispers turned to shouts faster than anyone can prepare for. Within days, the school wasn't just buzzing with rumors about use it was alive with them, sharpened like weapons. Walking down the hall felt like running a gauntlet. Slurs thrown casually. Locker doors slammed shut a little too hard when we passed. Teachers pretending not to notice. Friends who once sat beside me in the cafeteria now shifting to different tables without explanation. But through it all, Aiden stayed at my side. Bruised knuckles, sharp glare, fists clenched at the slightest provocation. He wasn't afraid for himself, was afraid for me. And yet, he didn't let go. Not once. The hardest part wasn't the names or the silence. It was the way the world seemed to shrink around us, pushing us into corners we hadn't asked for. I used to think detention was suffocating. Now I realized freedom had always been the illusion. The breaking point came the night of the spring dance. I hadn't planned on going, but Aiden showed up at my door in a black shirt and jacket, hair slightly messy in a way that somehow made him look like every reckless dream I'd ever had. "They don't get to take this from us," he said simply. So I went. Walking into that gym with him was like stepping onto a battlefield. Heads turned. Whispers surged. Some people laughed. Others sneered. A few, to my surprise, just stared with something like quiet awe. We danced. Not perfectly. Aiden hated following rules, even on the dance floor, but it was ours. His hand on my back, my forehead pressed against his shoulder, the music drowning out everything except the steady beat of his heart. For a few minutes, I let myself believe it could last. Then someone threw a drink. Cold soda splashed across my shirt, sticky and humiliating, laughter erupting around us. Aiden froze, rage trembling through his body. I grabbed his hand before he could launch himself into the crowd. "Don't," I whispered. "Please." He looked at me, jaw tight, chest heaving. And then, slowly, he let it go. That was the moment I realized how much he loved Menet, because he fought for me, but because, for once, he didn't. The fallout was brutal. The school called my parents. His parents. Meetings were held. Threats were made. But at the end of every exhausting day, we found each other. On the bleachers. In empty classrooms. Once, even on the roof under the stars, where he told me he didn't know what love was supposed to feel like, only that whatever this was, it was the first thing that had ever made sense. We were scared. We were reckless. We were alive. Graduation came faster than I expected. The auditorium was filled with caps and gowns, cameras flashing, families cheering. Aiden sat a few rows ahead of me, fidgeting like he couldn't wait to be anywhere else. When my name was called, I walked across the stage, heart pounding not from nerves but from the way I could feel his eyes on me. When his turn came, I clapped so loud people turned to stare. He smirked, shaking his head, but I saw the way his shoulders straightened. After the ceremony, chaos erupted: photos, hugs, tears. But somehow, we found each other outside, beneath the shade of the old oak tree by the parking lot. "So," he said, hands shoved in his pockets. "What now?" I laughed softly. "I guess that's up to us." For a long moment we just stood there, the noise of the crowd fading behind us. Then he reached out, hesitating just once before taking my hand. No one gasped. No one shouted. Maybe they were too busy with their own lives. Maybe they were just tired of caring. All I knew was that for the first time, holding his hand didn't feel like rebellion. Felt like truth. We didn't solve the world that day. We didn't suddenly erase the pain, the scars, the weight of what it meant to be us in a place that didn't always want us. But we had each other. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and fire, Aiden leaned in, pressing his forehead against mine. "Guess we weren't screwed after all," he murmured. I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "No, we were just waiting for this, for us." For the moment when punishment turned to destiny, and two broken boys realized they weren't broken at all, not when they were together. And in that fragile, perfect silence, I knew, whatever came next, we'd face it, not as rivals, not as strangers, but as something more, something real, something that had been ours all along. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.